Fate. Soft ticking clock fades in slowly. January 18th, 1945. Germany was dying, but it refused to fall silent. The snow had stopped falling 2 days ago, but the sky was still full of ash. Burned towns, frozen men, and the last breath of a collapsing empire. The Americans called it the Hurtgen Forest. The Germans called it der Friedhof, the cemetery. In this forest, time didn't move forward. It only counted down. Every step cracked the ice of someone else's grave. The 22nd Infantry had been fighting here for 113 days, a place where maps lied, compasses spun, and trees killed as efficiently as machine guns. It was not war, it was erosion. A slow grinding down of men, metal, and memory. Fate. At dawn, a platoon from Company K moved toward a nameless ridge east of Kleinhau. A ridge the Germans had held for 5 years, and the Americans had been dying to take for 5 months. They thought the artillery would clear the path. It didn't. It never did. Sudden explosion, echoing gunfire bursts. When the fog lifted, the ridge came alive. 3 MG-42s opened up, 1,200 rounds per minute each. 20 bullets every second, slicing through fog like saw blades of steel. Men dropped before they knew they'd been seen. "Down! Down!" Sergeant Bradley screamed, voice shredded by gunfire. But there was nowhere to go. The clearing was death in every direction. Private Kowalski tried to crawl back toward the tree line. He made it 11 meters before a burst caught him across the shoulders. He didn't scream, he just stopped moving. Heavy breathing, close gunfire, ricochets snapping off bark. Captain Osborne watched from a half-collapsed bunker 200 meters behind. He'd been awake for 37 hours. Out of 162 men, 79 still answered roll call. He had no artillery support, every gun already firing somewhere else. No reinforcements, no radio link to division. So he gave the order to the only man still capable of fighting back, Corporal James Hutchkins. Mortar tube being set in snow, metallic clank echoes. 3 men, 1 mortar, no line of sight. Their forward observer was dead, their radio destroyed, their lives hanging on one weapon that could no longer see the war it was fighting. In the manual, that meant the mission was impossible. But manuals don't win battles. Men do. Hutchkins wiped frost from his sight glass. He couldn't see the ridge, couldn't see the enemy, but he could hear them. The rhythm of the MG-42s cutting through fog in steady bursts. Sound became his map. Memory became his rangefinder. Instinct became his doctrine. At 6:52, he set his mortar in the frozen earth. He looked at the sky, then the dead, then his crew. 3 rounds, he said. That's all we get. A shell drops into the tube. Deep thud of a mortar firing, echo fading into snow-covered silence. In 90 seconds, he would change everything. Because when the manuals fail, instinct fights the war. Only wind, fade to black. Start Hutchkins closed his eyes for a heartbeat. Not to pray, not to beg, to remember. He had been here 3 days before, a patrol that cost 2 men and returned with nothing but a bearing. A ruined church tower, a stump against the sky, a map of angles burned into his memory. When he'd peered over the ridge that day, the tower had been directly behind him. If the tower was behind him and the guns were in front, then the enemy and the tower sat on opposite sides of a straight line that passed through his position. Geometry does not lie. A compass click, low metallic click as mortar traversing mechanism moves. There was no forward observer, no ranging party, no whisper of coordinates. There was only the stump, the cold, and the unblinking arithmetic of a man who had fired this weapon 460 times. Hutchkins did the math in his head. Mills, reciprocal bearings, elevation, like a carpenter measuring wood. He set the mortar facing the stump, then rotated it, 180 degrees. Reciprocal bearing. Aim behind to strike ahead. It was not a doctrine. It was desperation and craft. Charge 5, Hutchkins told Carmichael, voice low. Maximum propellant. Too much for the distance, but they had to clear the ridge and drop almost vertically on the reverse slope. Heavy shell being handled. chain clink, deep breath, a close metallic thump as round seats in the tube. The first round fired, a flat crack that bit the air. 51 seconds of waiting stretched like an age. The ticking clock returns, slower now. Then a distant crump, muffled by trees. A sound that meant more than metal meeting earth. A human noise followed. Screamed German words, high and raw, then confusion. Two guns stuttered. One kept singing its buzzsaw. Hutchkins did not cheer. He adjusted. 16 mils right, 25 mils lower. Second round loading, heavier thud. Mortar boom, a longer trailing echo. This impact came closer, sharper, and then the sound of movement on the ridge changed. Machine gun fire thinned. Panic replaced precision. Hutchkins watched, not with eyes, with years of effort and nights of cold calculation. He knew where the bipod had shifted, how frost would settle, how a barrel would cool. He compensated for everything the manuals ignored. Third round. Same deflection, same elevation. A crater, a cry, silence. A final low rumble, then nothing but wind and a faint bird call returning to the forest. 90 seconds. 3 rounds. 3 guns silenced or abandoned. Company K rose from the craters like men who had been given breath. They crossed the killing ground in 2 waves, boots thudding in the empty dust of shells. 43 made it to the trees. 43 lived to breathe air that did not tear with gunfire. Captain Osborne walked the ruined positions at 7:30, fingers running along twisted metal. "How did you do it?" he asked, not as commander but as a man who'd watched his sons disappear. Hutchkins only shrugged. "I aimed for the stump," he said simply. "Then a distant church bell that does not belong to this place." No one at division would write the technique into doctrine. No lecture hall would invite him. The manuals could not include the human courage to bet lives on a geometry no one taught. Yet the forest remembered. The men who crossed that clearing carried the memory in their bones, and in later years they would tell the story to sons and strangers like a talisman against fear. Wind fades, clock ticking slows to a stop. This was not simply a trick of a clever gunner. It was proof that men can force the rules of war to bend when every rule has failed them. Fade to distant horns, then silence. A long, reflective pause. Snow crunching under boots. Distant crackle of dying fire. When the smoke thinned, the forest looked older. Every tree shredded, every stump bleeding resin like open wounds. The air tasted of cordite and burnt pine. Company K moved through the silence like men afraid to wake it. They found the first German gun twisted into black scrap. The second, gone, only a crater filled with steam and blood. The third position was abandoned. Canteens still warm. Coffee made from acorns left behind in flight. Sergeant Bradley stood over it, shaking his head. He'd seen artillery level cities, but he'd never seen a single mortar silence a ridge. Footsteps in snow, metal clanking against helmets, muffled voices. At 7:30, Captain Osborne reached the hill. He moved between bodies, German, American, separated only by luck and the arc of a single round. He counted 3 hits, 2 direct, 1 close enough to change history. No cheering, no victory cries, just the hollow quiet that follows when men realize they've survived something that should have killed them. Osborne sent a runner back to report. Objective Baker secured. Light casualties. That was all headquarters would ever know. No mention of the geometry. No note about the stump, the reversed bearing, or the impossible accuracy. Just effective mortar support. Hutchkins didn't argue. He was already repacking the tube, baseplate, bipod, barrel. They'd fire back soon. He knew that. At 7:41, 6 shells fell on their old position. Precision German counterfire. Perfect aim, perfect timing. Except there was nothing left to hit. War rewards the man who moves first and punishes the one who hesitates. Hutchkins had learned that in Normandy. He learned it again here. In 90 seconds, he had rewritten the chapter of a battle nobody cared about. And then, like all soldiers, he kept moving. By the time the forest quieted, Company K held the ridge, a patch of ground not even marked on the maps. 14 lives saved, 33,000 lost in the Hurtgen. Mathematically, it meant nothing, but to the men who lived, it meant everything. Whisper of snow falling from a broken branch. That night, as they dug into the frozen ridge, Bradley looked across the line. He saw Hutchkins cleaning the mortar, fingers black with grease, eyes fixed on nothing. He wanted to say thank you. He didn't. In war, gratitude feels fragile, like a sound too soft for men who survived machine guns. So he just said, "Good shot." Hutchkins didn't look up. "Just math," he said. That it wasn't just math. It was instinct shaped by fear, precision born of desperation. A moment when a soldier stopped being a cog in the machine and became the machine itself. And for those 90 seconds, he held the line between logic and legend. Clock ticking stops. Snow crunching under boots. Distant crackle of dying fire. When the smoke thinned, the forest looked older. Every tree shredded, every stump bleeding resin like open wounds. The air tasted of cordite and burnt pine. Company K moved through the silence like men afraid to wake it. They found the first German gun twisted into black scrap. The second, gone, only a crater filled with steam and blood. The third position was abandoned. Canteens still warm. Coffee made from acorns left behind in flight. Sergeant Bradley stood over it, shaking his head. He'd seen artillery level cities, but he'd never seen a single mortar silence a ridge. Footsteps in snow, metal clanking against helmets, muffled voices. At 7:30, Captain Osborne reached the hill. He moved between bodies, German, American, separated only by luck and the arc of a single round. He counted 3 hits, 2 direct, 1 close enough to change history. No cheering, no victory cries, just the hollow quiet that follows when men realize they've survived something that should have killed them. Osborne sent a runner back to report. Objective Baker secured. Light casualties. That was all headquarters would ever know. No mention of the geometry. No note about the stump, the reversed bearing, or the impossible accuracy. Just effective mortar support. Hutchkins didn't argue. He was already repacking the tube, baseplate, bipod, barrel. They'd fire back soon. He knew that. At 7:41, 6 shells fell on their old position. Precision German counterfire. Perfect aim, perfect timing. Except there was nothing left to hit. War rewards the man who moves first and punishes the one who hesitates. Hutchkins had learned that in Normandy. He learned it again here. In 90 seconds, he had rewritten the chapter of a battle nobody cared about. And then, like all soldiers, he kept moving. By the time the forest quieted, Company K held the ridge, a patch of ground not even marked on the maps. 14 lives saved, 33,000 lost in the Hurtgen. Mathematically, it meant nothing, but to the men who lived, it meant everything. Whisper of snow falling from a broken branch. That night, as they dug into the frozen ridge, Bradley looked across the line. He saw Hutchkins cleaning the mortar, fingers black with grease, eyes fixed on nothing. He wanted to say thank you. He didn't. In war, gratitude feels fragile, like a sound too soft for men who survived machine guns. So he just said, "Good shot." Hutchkins didn't look up. "Just math," he said. That it wasn't just math. It was instinct shaped by fear, precision born of desperation. A moment when a soldier stopped being a cog in the machine and became the machine itself. And for those 90 seconds, he held the line between logic and legend. Clock ticking stops. Wind in the pines, faint breath in cold air. January 18th, 1945. Hurtgen Forest, Germany. Snow hung thick as smoke. The war had turned the forest into a graveyard of trees and men. 3 German MG-42s ruled the clearing ahead, cutting down anyone who moved. Company K was pinned, shredded in the first 30 seconds. In a shallow pit 200 meters behind the line, Corporal James Hutchkins crouched beside a single 81mm mortar, the last weapon still functional. His radio was gone, his observer dead, and 3 machine guns were turning the forest into a meat grinder. Doctrine said, "You can't fire what you can't see," but doctrine had never fought in this place. The Hurtgen was hell disguised as woodland, thick spruce, branches interlocked, sun strangled by smoke. Tree bursts turned every explosion into a rain of knives. Men died without even standing up. Hutchkins checked the map, then the compass, then the horizon. But the horizon didn't exist here. Only trees and noise and the smell of cordite. He remembered something from 3 days before. A church tower, half destroyed, still standing behind him. He'd seen the German ridge when the tower was directly at his back. If he could find the tower again, he could find the angle, the geometry, the line that made no sense. He turned the sight backward. Weiss stared. "We're aiming the wrong way," he said. "No," Hutchkins whispered. "We're aiming right, just backward." He set the deflection, 3,200 mils, a perfect half-turn, elevation, 83 degrees, nearly vertical. Charge, 5, maximum range. He was betting 14 men on math and memory. The first shell vanished into the clouds. 49 seconds of silence followed. Then, impact, a dull thud. Then screaming, faint, distorted by trees. 1 gun fell silent. 2 kept firing. Etchkins adjusted right, 16 mils, dropped the second round. This one landed closer, sharper. The forest echoed, then went quiet again. 2 guns gone, 1 left. Hutchkins loaded the final shell himself. He didn't breathe. He didn't blink. He whispered, "Geometry, don't fail me now." The explosion rolled through the forest like a held breath exhaling. Then, nothing. No more guns, just wind. 90 seconds, 3 rounds, 3 guns silenced. Company K rose from the craters like ghosts reawakening. They crossed the clearing without a shot fired. Sergeant Bradley led them through the smoke, finding only wrecked barrels, shattered steel, and bodies frozen mid-command. Captain Osborne arrived minutes later, stunned. He asked, "How the hell did you do that?" Hutchkins didn't answer. He was already packing up the tube. Because the Germans would answer back soon, and in this forest, answers always came in high explosive. Carmichael, Weiss, Hutchkins, 3 men, 1 mortar. They moved 30 meters south, dug a new hole, and waited. At 7:41, German artillery found their old position. 6 shells, precise, furious, too late. The war had moved on. The math had already worked. There would be no medal for geometry, no doctrine for what he'd done, no chapter in the manual for aiming backward. Only 3 shots, and 14 men who got to go home. The forest took back its silence, and snow began to fall again, soft as ash over the place where math had saved lives. Faint crack of frozen branches. Dawn had come and gone, but in the frozen pit behind the line, the war stayed the same. By mid-morning, a runner brought the after-action report, a thin sheet of paper, damp with frost and the smell of smoke. 173 words. That was all the Army would remember of Kleinhau. It read, "Company K secured Objective Baker at 0745 with light casualties. Effective mortar support credited for neutralizing enemy resistance. No mention of backward sighting, no geometry, no miracle, just effective mortar support. Paper wars are clean, real wars are not." Captain Osborne signed his name at the bottom. His pen trembled so much he tore the page. Hutchkins never read the report. He didn't need to. He already knew what it said. Nothing that mattered. By noon, they were ordered to move again. Different ridge, same forest, same silence. Hutchkins carried the tube. Weiss, the base plate. Carmichael, the bipod. They moved without talking. You don't speak in the Hurtgen. You breathe quietly, you listen, and you pray. For 3 more days, Company K held that ridge, Snow froze into armor on their coats. Blood froze faster. They ate rations that cracked like glass and wrote letters home they never mailed. The Germans counterattacked on the fourth day, a barrage so heavy the sky looked solid. When it ended, Hutchkins' position was gone, just a crater filled with splinters and smoke. He and his crew survived by inches. They crawled out, deaf from concussion, eyes burning from the blast. Carmichael coughed blood into the snow. Weiss stared blankly at the sky. Hutchkins just laughed once, low, cracked, unbelieving. He whispered, "They finally hit the math." At 7:41, counter-battery fire slammed into their old position again. The Germans never stopped shooting where the ghosts used to be. That's how war works. Everyone fires at memories. By nightfall, Company K was down to 63 men. Half frostbite, half shell shock. No medals, no speeches, just the next set of coordinates and the same frozen sky. Somewhere above, snow drifted through the shattered branches and fell quietly over the cratered ground, the forest erasing its own scars. The battle for Kleinhau was over, but the Hurtgen had one rule: no victory ever stays won. 3 rounds, 90 seconds. They had changed nothing and everything. Somewhere beyond the line, paper and ink were already rewriting what happened, and the men who had lived it were already walking toward another impossible clearing. Because in the Hurtgen, every ridge looks the same, until you're asked to die on it. The forest fell silent again, a silence that no man trusted. Every soldier in Company K knew what came after silence. Death always followed quiet. At dawn, fog rolled in so thick it erased the world. You couldn't tell east from west, friend from shadow. At dawn, Hutchkins sat by his weapon, the barrel still warm from yesterday's fight. He ran his hand across the steel, the only thing in this place that still obeyed reason. Weiss was gone. A shell took him sometime during the night. It's all graves anyway. Slow, metal clink, distant crow cry. Orders came down. Hold the ridge. No retreat, no fallback. The generals called it strategic importance. The men called it suicide. By nightfall, the fog turned to snow. Each flake glowed faintly under the muzzle flashes. 1,000 tiny ghosts drifting between bursts of fire. At 22:30, the Germans attacked again. Flamethrowers this time. The air turned liquid with fire. Hutchkins fired 3 rounds, one after another, blind into the heat. Each detonation thundered like a god's heartbeat. Febby explosions echo, flames roaring. When the barrage ended, the slope was quiet again. Charred, broken, unrecognizable. The radio crackled once, static, then a voice. Hold position. Reinforcements inbound. Reinforcements never came. For the rest of the night, Hutchkins sat beside the cratered earth, watching the snow bury the fire. He wondered how many times the same ridge had been taken, lost and taken again. He wondered if anyone, anywhere, even remembered its name. At dawn, Captain Osborne's body was found, still clutching the report from the day before. His signature smeared, frozen in the blood that sealed it. Hutchkins read it for the first time. He smiled once, just once, and folded it into his jacket pocket. He would carry that paper until the war ended, because words, unlike men, survive the winter. Distant thunder of artillery fading far away.